Hello out there. This is Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Coach Aaron, the source. Guys, we're just gonna have a little fun. Today's topic is, how do you know if your training is junk? And what we mean by that is, we hear a lot of, me and EJ were talking this week, and we hear a lot of these programs that people are doing on their own. Some of them they're getting from the internet. Some of them they're getting from some guy in the gym. They're getting them from just all over the place. And sometimes it's comical. Sometimes it's maddening. And sometimes you just shake your head and be like, you throw your hands up, what can you do? And so, I guess what we'll do is we'll just kind of talk about training in general, what you should be doing in terms of, how it should be making sense to you, and maybe some of the examples out there. And this conversation was kind of spurred on by an athlete that EJ was telling me about and their workout routine. And if you want, EJ, I can kind of give you my take on it, or you can go ahead and tell the story. But I think it's pretty typical.
Yeah, I think it's a situation with a lot of athletes and parents not really knowing what to do and thinking that more is better. And the more you do, the stronger and faster you get. And it's just, there's no guidance. There's no plan. It's just, I'm going to do this every day and do it. And, it may be like one day they do it hard and then, okay, I'll do it again tomorrow. And then I'll take 4 days off because I'm trying to heal my body and do it hard again. It's kind of like that CrossFit thing back, you kill your body and you can't ever recover. Well, I just thought it was interesting. The athletes, I asked him, I go, tell me what you do. And he told me what he was doing. I said, okay, so what are you doing the rest of the week? And he really didn't know what he was doing. It's an eager guy, great kid, but just not knowing what to do. And I was like, hey, we need to get you into a management program and managing what you need to do. So he was just out of control. And I just said, you don't do everything to failure.
Right.
You can't do that every workout. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. And though it's eager, it's great. I love the ambition. I love the enthusiasm. But, Aaron, we've been in this industry a long time. You're a professional at what you do. I think the best. Please educate the general public about training, because there's a lot of junk out there, my friend.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to kind of put this so that it's in a structured framework. But I mean, I guess a few things. One, your training is junk if you're training to failure, in my opinion. You usually don't have to do things to failure. And the problem with doing things to failure is you're just beating the muscle up. And, it's kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to do 500 push-ups. Well, probably by the time you get to, rep 60, 70, 80, 100, everything after that is probably a point of diminishing returns. So you're not getting much out of it after that. Two, probably a somewhat big degradation in the execution. In other words, the quality of how you're doing those push-ups. So I'm not a big fan of the training to failure.
Right.
Because in most sports, you're not doing anything to failure. So why are you training and you can get plenty of muscle growth well before you get to failure. So one, I just don't think it's great for the muscles in terms of recovery and being able to come back and do, another quality workout. Two, your quality suffers, so I think training to failure is one big thing.
Okay. I like that.
I think another one, your training is junk, and I kind of alluded to this in my previous explanation, is if there's no transfer. Okay. In other words, what I mean by that, it doesn't have to be a direct line, but you got to say, okay, what the exercise I'm doing, how does it correlate to one, either my athletic development or correlate to some of the activities I'm going to perform in sport. Okay. And what I mean by that is I'll get athletes who are baseball players, for instance.
Okay.
And all they want to do are curls.
You mean these things right here?
Bicep curls, exactly. And they'll do 3 different variations of, they'll do bicep curls with the bar, and then they'll do reverse pull-ups, and then they'll, and they're doing all of these exercises that build the biceps. Right. And I'm like, okay, well, how does that help you in throwing and hitting? Most of us know that to hit the ball harder, that generally comes from your lower body and the transfer of force through your upper body.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You're throwing, it's the same thing. You're talking about ground reaction forces that come up through the body, and your arms are more or less the levers that propel the bat, propel the ball. So why would you do muscle isolation? But that's what I see. So in other words, again, you're training junk if you can't draw a correlation, right, a logical correlation to transfer to your sport. Another one might be, I just had it and it went out of my head. Shoot.
I have those moments all the time, Aaron.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, all the time. Aaron, it's funny. As you're thinking about that, and I think about training and is your training any good or is it junk? I think athletes they don't really know what's going on. They think if like one day a guy's doing his biceps, or doing, upper body, a lot of upper body. They're hitting the back hard, then they hit another muscle group hard. Everything's hard. And then how long does it take for an athlete to recover doing something like that? Exactly. I mean, to me, that's like 5 days of trying to get all that lactic acid out of you, trying to get your strength back, your motivation. I'm more tired. You're a tired athlete. You don't recover as fast, and there's no production there. There's just no production.
Yeah. And that brings me to the next point, and you mentioned it right when I was thinking about it. Your training's junk if you don't build in proper recovery, because you need to break the muscle down, not destroy it, but break the muscle down, and then have time for it to recover and build back up. If you're always breaking it down, you never give the body the chance to build that muscle back up. So if you're always taking 2 steps back every day, you're going to find yourself behind. Training is more like 2 steps back, or 1 step back, 2 steps forward.
Okay.
If you're always taking that step back and you don't give your body a chance to take those 2 steps forward, i.e. recovery, you're not going to get to where you want to be.
So Aaron, so are you saying the recovery is super important so your muscle can gain growth, right? Or
that's when it builds.
Okay, gotcha.
During the recovery process.
Right.
If you don't have a recovery process, it's never building. You're just tearing it down.
That is one thing that I think a lot of people out there listening to us today don't understand, that recovery is critical to your development as an athlete.
Another one, your training is junk when, and I mentioned this before, you muscle isolate.
Oh.
Okay. About the guy who does the bicep curl. As an athlete, right, you're talking about function, not form. And what happens is a lot of people fall into the kind of the bodybuilding mode of training. And so they're isolating muscle groups. And bodybuilders do that because they want that muscle to grow, because their focus is for that muscle to grow in size. And of course, strength comes with that size. But as an athlete, it's okay to have the size, but you have to have function and flow. That muscle has to be explosive. It has to be able to work in concert with the other muscles in that chain. So you're not just talking about the bicep, you're also talking about the forearm, the tricep, the shoulder, the shoulder area. And so that all has to work together. If you just bulk this up and you look like Popeye, then that puts stress on this area here, and it could put stress on another area there. So, when you're doing your exercises, it should be, we call them full chain exercises. So instead of doing a bicep curl, which isolates the bicep, maybe you're doing a full push or a full pull. So you might be doing a row, or you might be doing a full pull up, full extent, pull up. You might be doing some kind of cable pull where you're getting full extension and you're getting all of those muscle groups to work in coordination. And so that way you have that range of motion, you have that flow, but you're not just pumping this one muscle. So
that leads me to this question of acceleration, deceleration of the muscle.
Exactly.
Is that what you're actually doing? I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and basically what we're talking about with athletic activities is acceleration and deceleration, whether it's throwing, kicking, running, jumping, and that is not done by just one muscle group.
Gotcha.
The only time I usually will have an athlete isolate a muscle is when it's been, when it's been injured.
Right.
Because then you want to, you have to isolate because you want to build it up. But after that initial isolation and building it up by itself, you still have to segue into full chain movements, because now you still got to get it to act as part of the group. So
makes sense,
you still always come back to function. Even though you may have to at some point do isolation, like I said, generally because of an injury.
Man, that makes a lot of sense. I think the true athleticism of athletes playing different sports is just, I don't see it getting better I'm in the youth level, high school, collegiate level. I just see a lot of videos out there of guys like, I'm maxing out. I just squatted 550. It's my PR. And, I'm like, what does that have to do with what we're doing in an activity? I mean, I see this all the time. Like, I'm going to do all this because I need to get bigger. My coach said I need to get bigger.
Right.
I would say you need to get to be more of an athlete. You need to have your body moving aggressively. Look, I wasn't a very big guy. I was 5'10" and a half. If I had heels on, big old platforms you whip back in the 70s, bro. But what I'm saying is, I was a $175, $180, Aaron, and I thought I was pound for pound very, very strong because I was able to hit the ball a long way, throw very quickly, run well. And I think back at that, it had nothing to do how big I was, but how well I could function, how I was able to make a play defensively in the infield. I was being off balance and throw the ball across the diamond with some velocity. That was the functionality of my body moving together, being coordinated to be able to do that. If I was just a stiff athlete that was just big, I couldn't have turned my hips and got my arm in a position to make that play, or get down and actually field it and have good hip mobility, right?
Right.
I don't know about this these days. I think training, I see a lot of people just buying it to get big. Yeah. So,
well, again, and that actually, we can segue that into my next one. Your training is junk when you don't have a plan. Okay. And basically what you're talking about is that whole shotgun approach that people take. They get this mishmash of exercises that, hey, this guy said this exercise is good. This guy said this exercise is good.
Right.
I read this here, or, the USC baseball program's doing this. And they get all of this stuff and they just throw it together and they're just doing a bunch of stuff.
Right.
And the exercises by themselves may not be bad exercises, but there has to be some synergy created with everything that you're doing that gives you the total effect of training. Right. And so when you start to take all these bits and pieces, they may not necessarily go together. Now, it doesn't mean that, again, they're individually, they're not good or bad exercises, is that right. They need to be able to complement each other, continue to move you along. And unless you sit down and say, okay, I have this variety of exercises I'd like to do, which ones work together and which ones don't. And you say, okay, these ones that work together, I'm going to segment those, and that's going to be a training program. Right. And then maybe I'll move on to these other ones after I finish this first training program, but instead of, just doing everything, I see that quite a bit. And the thing is, usually when you have people who do that, they don't stick with the exercises long enough. Right. So again, planning becomes a big part of your training. And if you don't plan, it's going to be junk.
And I see it when you go through your evaluation with athletes, and I watch them and I ask them, did they complete the workout? And a lot of times you go, kind of. We got halfway through it, or some guys finish it, but it's real sloppy because they're not, as you said, function and flow to be an athlete, and having those things work together. So I think that's critical. When you said that, it made me think, saw this guy come in and work out with you. And, it's funny to see these guys who are later in high school come to you and go, okay, this is what I've been doing. And then they have trouble doing all those exercises you have them put you, and these are basic things like, can you squat correctly without a weight?
Right.
Can you one leg squat? Can you hurdle over this hurdle, walk through it without stepping? Can you get your hip up over, so I marvel at what you do when you do those, when your training is not junk, but it is correct.
Right. Yeah. There's always gotta be a functional foundation, and you build off of that, because as athletes, we do some incredible, beautiful things, but they still come down to some basics: lunging, jumping, running, what I'm saying? Sidestepping. They're just variations of that. And maybe there are multiples of that, but they all come down to some very basic movements. And if you don't have those down, or if you have some deficiencies in those movements, you're going to have some problems, i.e. injuries or lack of performance.
Right.
So, that's very important. Another reason why your training might be junk, and I'm seeing this a lot with my middle schoolers.
Okay.
It's not age appropriate. And I get it. There's not a lot of information directed at middle school kids, let alone elementary, school kids. And, most programs are written, and a lot of the literature you see are for adult athletes.
Right.
And so I get it's hard to kind of, how do you pull out of that what's going to be appropriate for a younger athlete? And so you got to be careful. Just because the UCLA football team does this workout doesn't mean your 10-year-old should be doing it or trying to copy it.
Right.
So there may be some variations or iterations that you can do that are a lot less advanced than what they're doing, but maybe similar body movements. But you've got to be careful with, the intensity and the volume when younger athletes.
Right.
And so again, it also goes back to, are you trying to give them all these advanced exercises, or are you trying to give them the foundation of development for him to move forward or her to move forward?
Right.
And so younger athletes, especially, adolescent, their focus should be on overall athletic development function, not, can I jump on this 34-inch box?
Yeah, that's,
right.
I saw it on TikTok. Can I do that? Can my 10-year-old do it?
Yeah, exactly. The Instagram and TikTok workouts. And again, it all looks sexy and everything, but is it really appropriate? And if it's not age appropriate, it's junk.
Like that. Well said there. Well said. Well, Aaron, that's a really good capsule of is your training junk? And you gave some great advice and tidbits for what athletes should be doing. Whether it's a younger athlete or it's a more established athlete, and knowing this. So that was great. Good stuff right there, man. I love that.
Pretty good for an impromptu subject.
Not too bad. Well, as I always say, hey, this is Eric Johnson, the brand, here again.
And Coach Aaron, the source. We'll see you.